was threatened another sign. It's not fun. Okay, what does the abbreviation PSK mean? It is phase shift key. It's just something to remember. What it does is it's a modulation method where you change the phase of the signal, the peak and valley phase. You either delay it or advance it. Which of the following best describes DMR, digital mobile radio? It is a technique for time multiplexing two digital voice signals on a single 12.5 kilohertz repeater channel. What DMR allows you to do is in one repeater channel, you can have two voices going on at the same time. Okay? Two people separately can be talking. 12.5 kilohertz. Remember, the FM channel is normally 10 to 15, so 12.5.
So does that set up just sort of like digital television does, where you have a frequency and then there are two separate channels within the frequency?
Yeah. This is done with what's called time division multiplexing, which means that half of the time you're listening to one, the other half you're listening to the other, but the person out there only hears the one that they're supposed to.
I'm not even going to try to.
It's a real tough multiplex. It's nasty. Okay? Which of the following can be included in packet transmissions? A checksum to permit error detection, a header that contains the call sign of the station to which the information is being sent, and an automatic repeat request in case of an error. All those. ARQ, automatic repeat request, is a way of, you get an error, you send back a message that says, resend that. By the way, the internet does that all the time. Okay? You get packets on the internet on your PC once in a while that are no good. Your PC automatically sends back an ARQ, says, send that again. It also detects if a packet's missing. The packets have a serial number. And if it gets number 5 before it gets number 4, it sends a request for, we didn't get number 4. Now that means it has to store packets. That's why you need memory. That's why this didn't work 40 years ago when we didn't have the memory to do it. What code is used when sending CW in the amateur band international Morse? Okay. Which of the following operating activities is supported by digital mode software in the WSJT suite? Moon bounce or moon-earth, weak signal propagation beacons, and meteor scatter. WSJT is a new suite of software that you can download, control your transceiver with it. You never talk to the person. You type in little short messages and you talk back and forth that way. But I'll tell you what, it will get across when nothing else will. What is an ARQ transmission system? It is an automatic, it's a digital scheme whereby the receiving station detects errors and sends a request to the sending station to retransmit the information. What I said about on the internet, where a bad packet gets retransmitted. Which of the following best describes the broadband HAMNet, also referred to as high-speed multimedia network? It is an amateur radio-based data network using commercial Wi-Fi gear with modified firmware. You can actually take a Cisco router, download new firmware into it, and it'll run in this mode. And you can do all kinds of neat things with these. I've actually had 4 of the old routers that are loaded that way, that I can set up a network anywhere. I can also, if I can get one of them to see each other, extend my home network out. What is FT8? It's a digital mode capable of operating in low signal to noise conditions that transmits on 15-second intervals. It's very time dependent. It's every 15 seconds it sends. That's it. And then it sits and listens.
It's a data mode.
It's a data mode. It is one of the lowest noise. The JT65 is one, FT8 is another. FT8 is far superior. What is an electronic keyer? It's a device that assists in manual sending of Morse code. The old key that you did this with. This thing has two paddles. Press the one paddle, you get dots. You press the other one, you get dashes. If you hold them down, you get continual dots and continual dashes. So instead of hitting the key 3 times to get an S, you hit it, hold it long enough for the 3 dots and let go of it. I know how they work. Okay, what am I doing wrong? What is a beam antenna? You remember the antenna with the boom and the elements? That's a beam. It beams the signal, it concentrates the signal in one direction. Okay? It's just, now, what that does is that it makes the signal in that direction sound louder, in effect. When I point my beam antenna at somebody and turn on the transmitter, it is the equivalent of an 800-watt transmitter on an Omni antenna in that direction. Of course, nobody else hears much of it. But that $25, $30 worth of parts that I threw together for an antenna was a lot cheaper than a power amplifier to get 800 watts. Which of the following describes a type of antenna loading? Loading an antenna is taking an antenna that's too short and put a coil or an inductor in the center of it, or on the top, or on the bottom, to make it electrically look longer. Because you want it to resonate at that frequency. The fact that it's still not a good, super great antenna, the fact that it resonates at the right frequency means that it does actually put out a good signal. It's inserting an inductor in a radiating portion of the antenna, somewhere here, to make it electrically longer. Okay. Usually you'll see on the antenna a lump of some sort.
You get the cut the antenna and then put the coil in it?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of companies make those antennas.
Is that the ones with the bulges? And
Yeah, yeah. You got a lump in the middle of it, yeah, bulge.
Okay.
Now, the one that I have, one of them has those. The other one has looks like a little pigtail in the middle. That actually works totally different. That makes the 2-meter one look longer, yes, but it segments the 70 centimeter into 2 antennas. And I get 3 dB of gain out of it because it's phased right. That's what the word is. Which of the following describes a simple dipole oriented parallel to the Earth's surface? Got an antenna that's got 2 pieces going out. It can be 2 pieces of aluminum. It can be 2 long wires going out from the center. It's called a dipole. And it's horizontally polarized. If you think about it, whatever the way the radiator sets is what it is. It's horizontal or vertical. Okay? By the way, one of the best antennas for HF at low cost is a long piece of wire that's set at the right length, feeding it in the center as a dipole. That's probably as good as it gets until you get into what I'm going to call exotic antennas. by the way, there's a guy by the name of the Wireman that sells wire that sort of hides itself. There are people who are living in Nazi prisoner of war camps who actually have up those wire antennas. Eventually, though, somebody does find them.
You talking about homeowners association?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were.
Sorry.
When you said
Uh,
that before,
I have a hard time calling them that because they usually are anti-homeowner.
yeah. Well, I would never look at these sidewalks, streetlights, or public works.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I'll tell you how I feel about it. I have to deal with the township zoning officers and that group. And they have some sense of
Standards, too.
standards, and there's some sense of them having some legitimate authority to tell me to do things. Some sense. Now I've got a second layer that in many cases is more emotional than it is legal. Okay? My son-in-law and I finished a shed after a long day of work. We're in the house, it's about 7:30, we've just come in, started to eat. There's a rattle at the door. And the old biddy down the street that runs the camp is at the door telling us that we have only 90 days to get that thing painted the right color.
Need the hobby.
What?
You need the hobby.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, come on. We barely got the thing up. Oh, by the way, the paint is sitting there because she's already told them they need to paint it. Oh, okay. What is the disadvantage of the rubber duck antenna supplied with most handheld radio transceivers when compared to a full-size quarter-wave antenna? It does not transmit or receive it as effectively. I should have brought mine in. I have an HT in the car. It's got a 19-inch antenna on it. And that works beautifully.
So, relative dB gain loss and quarter, half, full wave, is there an equivalency that's a norm?
Yeah.
So, just like, give me an example,
The 19-inch
which is a quarter.
is 0 dB gain. Anybody who tells you anything else is blowing smoke.
Okay.
Okay. Anything shorter than that is negative gain.
Okay, so
Or
rubber
loss.
ducky might be -3, -6.
I'll tell you, what my experience has been, it isn't as good as -6, which
Okay.
is quarter.
Okay.
All right? A good half-wave dipole, even if it's a half-wave setting vertically, is a good 3, maybe 4 dB a gain.
Okay.
Okay? So, yeah, without getting exotic, you can do some things. By the way, in the homeowners agreement, homeowners things, there is a negative to doing this because you're putting it close to vegetation. But I've actually, for a guy, built a half-wave dipole, which is 38 inches long, in a piece of PVC with a center feed, and we hung it in an arborvitae. And in Lancaster, he was hitting, I think, 20 or 21 repeaters.
Don't some people put those dipoles in their attics too?
Yes, as long as you don't have metal, you can put them in the
I
attic.
do that and it works great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Mhm. Yes.
Because I mean, I got 60 feet from, you know, in the upstairs in the
At
attic.
66 feet, we'll get you a 40-meter dipole.
Well, I don't think it's 66. Yeah.
Well, okay.
All right, I got to build on.
Now, I will tell you a little trick.
Just a 6-foot extension.
We have
that's all you
learned,
need.
we have learned that 60 feet with 3 feet hanging down on each end still
Still
works.
works.
It's down a little bit, but not much. Yeah, so,
And if it's, what do you have, a 2-story house?
It's a ranch, but it's a walkout basement, so half of it's
So you,
second story.
relatively, you have nice to the height, not the recommended height, but
But
there
it
are
ain't big.
dipoles that are at the recommended height anyway. Do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. How would you change a dipole antenna to make it resonant on a higher frequency? Okay. You're going to make it a half wave. If you want to move the frequency up, what do you do to the wavelength? It gets shorter. You go out with your cutters and cut a piece off. Okay? What type of antennas are quads, Yagis, and dish? Directional. The Yagi, the quad is nothing but a diamond-shaped Yagi. What is a disadvantage of using a VHF handheld transceiver with its integral antenna inside a vehicle? In other words, using your HT with a rubber duck inside the vehicle. The signals might not propagate well due to the shielding effect of the vehicle. It won't. The biggest thing you can do with an HT, if you're going to use it in a car, is get a quarter wave vertical on the roof. And there's $20. You could spend a whole lot of money on everything else and not get the same advantage. Typically, if I run my short antenna, I have a winter antenna that I put on the car that will go in the garage. Short. I lose very little with that. What is the approximate length in inches of a quarter wave vertical antenna for 146 megahertz? Now this sounds like an absolute, but think about it. What is the wavelength for 146 megahertz? 300 divided by 146. Okay? It's a little over 2, right?
Yeah.
Okay? Now, you could multiply that by 39.37 inches in a meter. Okay? Or you could multiply it by 40, which is close enough, which gets you, what, 79 inches, something like that? Let's say 80 inches. Okay, now you're going to have a quarter wave antenna. If your full wave is 80 inches, how long is a quarter wave? Divided by 4. 20. Okay, which answer up there is close to 20?
19?
You lost me at 2.
Okay, you have 2 meters. How many inches are in 2 meters?
I have no idea.
Okay,
6
that's,
feet, it's 40.
okay.
about
You
40
can figure 40 inches to a meter.
Okay.
Okay, it's actually 39, 37, but for any of these questions, 40 is good enough.
Okay.
Okay, you take 40 times 2 is,
82.
divide 82 by 4.
Okay.
Got it?
And now I'm with you. Now I'm with you.
Okay? Yeah, you've already learned everything you need to know except one thing, and that's how many inches in a meter. And I thought anybody under 50 years old knew what the metric system was. Us old guys know. But,
I've had no use for it.
oh, okay, I've had no use for it either. Okay, what is the approximate length in inches of a half-wave 6-meter dipole antenna? Now, it's 6 meters. You already have the meters. Times 40 gives you 240. And it's halfway. So 240 divided by 2 is what?
120.
Okay. What's the closest answer?
112.
Okay. In which direction does a half-wave dipole antenna radiate the strongest signal? Right now, if I'm a half-wave dipole antenna, that way, front and back. Okay? And it's equal front and back, because it's not a beam. Okay? Broadside to the antenna. The way the antenna is, 90 degrees off. When I was talking about doing radio direction finding, that's what we're doing, is we're turning the antenna to find the right spot. Have any of you ever taken a saw and tried to cut a board at 90 degrees without using a square? Without drawing a line, just rough it. How'd that work out? What? Okay. If you checked it with a square later, it wasn't real close. Okay, when we do this with an antenna, we like to do it with two people. I'm not looking at where I'm facing, but we put somebody off the end of the antenna, and they shoot a compass line over the antenna when we've got the point. And then we add 90 degrees. Because this is more accurate than this. You cannot estimate 90 degrees super accurately. You're going to be somewhere between 86 and 94. And if you're happen to be at 90 or 89, that's great, but if you happen to be at 86, your line goes 4 degrees off, and it's not good. What is the gain of an antenna? It's the increase in signal strength in a specified direction compared to the reference antenna. A reference antenna is a quarter wave dipole. If I increase the signal strength by 6 dB in that direction, it's got 6 dB of gain. What is an advantage of using a properly mounted 5/8 wave antenna for VHF or UHF mobile service? My antenna on the back of the car, the one with the little screw in the middle of it, is a 5/8 wave. And it's there for a reason. It doesn't have much gain over a quarter wave dipole. It's 19 inches long and it's 40 something. But what it does, the quarter wave antenna, the strongest signal goes out at 45 degrees up. Who's going to hear that one? Aircraft, aliens. The 5/8 wave, that strongest signal is down almost horizontal. So even though I don't have the heavy gain that you would think, I do have a stronger signal there. And a 5/8, that's one of the reasons I run 5/8 during the summer, because I'm doing a lot of my bike rides and stuff, and I want the best signal. In the winter, I don't care if I don't get a repeater. I run the other one. Why is it important to have a low SWR when using a coaxial feed line? To reduce signal loss. The worse the SWR is, the more you lose. What is the impedance of most coaxial cables used in amateur radio installations? Memory item, 50 ohms. Okay, that's simple. By the way, most of your TV cable is 72 or 75. It's not interchangeable. Why is coaxial cable the most common feed line selected for amateur radio antenna systems? It's easy to use, requires very few installation considerations. Some other feed lines you have to keep away from metal. With coax, you can tape it to a copper tubing if you want to, it won't hurt it. What is the major function of an antenna tuner or antenna coupler? It matches the antenna system impedance to the transmitter's output impedance. All it does is make the two of them think they're okay together. It matches. In general, what happens as the frequency of a signal passing through a coaxial cable is increased, the loss increases. No matter what cable you buy, 2.5-inch hard line at $20 a foot. The further up in frequency you go, the more loss you get per foot. Okay? It's just that where you start on the graph gets better. If you buy the very inexpensive Radio Shack coax and use it, do not go over 15 feet with it. At 30 feet on 2 meters, you lose 3/4 of your signal. 100 feet, I'm sorry, 100 feet on 2 meters, you lose 3/4 of your signal. Coaxial connectors, real quickly, so that you know what they are. The middle one is the one that you're going to see used the most. It's the one we used for CBs, everything else. It's called a PL259. The jack on the equipment is an SO239. There's a smaller one called a BNC. There's a large one called an N connector that we will talk about here. The N connector is a better connector, but nobody uses it much until you get into commercial. Okay? So, and there's also another one now, and I need to get the picture on here. It's called an SMA. It's the little one that is used on the Baofengs and most of the newer transmitters. Which of the following connectors is most suitable for frequencies above 400 megahertz? The N connector, this guy here. However, I do not know of a 70 centimeter transmitter, commercial transmitter, that has N connectors on the back of it. They all have.
Amateur.
What?
You mean amateur?
Yeah. Yep. I don't know of one. Which of the following is true of the PL259 coax connectors? They're commonly used at HF frequencies. What's what's the frequency range for HF?
3 to 30.
30.
What?
30.
3 to 30. What's VHF?
30 to 300.
It's all threes. And then UHF is 300 to 3,000. Why should coax connectors exposed to the weather be sealed against water intrusion to prevent increase in feed line loss? You get water down in there, it just does all kinds of nasty things. What can cause erratic changes in SWR readings? Erratic changes in any reading is usually a loose connection. If you can tap it and things change, something's loose. What is the electrical difference between RG58 and RG8 coaxial cable? The difference is RG58 is thinner than my finger. It's under a 1/4 inch. RG8 is up around a 1/2 inch. The RG8 cable has less loss at a given frequency. It's more expensive, yes.
Is it okay to use 58, like, I mean, on your desk if you're, like, it's a foot long or?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I've got some 3-foot 58 jumpers that I use. My lines in the car that are 12, 14 feet long are 58s. You're getting about 1 dB of loss at 15 feet. However, when you start running them out 100 feet, that's another matter. My preferred is something called RG8X. It's a compromise. It's a little thicker than the 58. It's got a lot less loss than the 58. It's only a little bit more expensive, but it's a much better cable. And since it's only a little heavier, it's not bad to run. You know, it also is okay on HF.
Does it require its own style of connector, or does it use a 58 connector?
It uses the same connector, but the adapter that goes in the connector is different. It has to have a little bit bigger hole in it. Now, I've had a situation where I didn't have one of those, and a drill will take care of that problem. Okay. Which of the following types of feed line has the lowest loss at VHF and UHF, air insulated hardline. It's the best. But it's horribly expensive and it's hard to work with. Which of the following is a safety hazard of a 12-volt storage battery? By the way, this section contains some of the most important questions as far as I'm concerned in the thing. Shorting the terminals can cause burns, fire, or an explosion. If you are playing around with a 12-volt storage battery, please throw a rag over the terminals. If you can't do anything else, throw a rag over the terminals. Reason is, if you happen to drop something metal on top of the battery, the rag will probably keep it from shorting. You've just eliminated or reduced a explosion or fire hazard, okay? Anything that you put over those terminals to keep yourself from accidentally dropping a wrench on them, which can cause a problem, okay? I see people getting under the hood, laying wrenches on top of the battery, and I shudder, okay? What health hazard is represented by electrical current flowing through the body? It may cause injury by heating tissue, it may disrupt the electrical functions of the cells, and it can cause voluntary muscle contractions. All of the above.
Tasers are awesome for that.
What?
Tasers are awesome for that.
Oh, you know what? I sort of have this feeling I'd love to know what that's like.
I would
No.
know.
Just to know.
It's rather breathtaking. It's just-
But I am not ready to do it, okay?
You're not fully committed yet.
No,
Can I add something about the
Yeah.
involuntary muscle contractions?
yeah,
When like one of the guys in like the movies goes flying because he touched something electrical, that is actually like it's slightly over exaggerated, but not much.
I have been put down on the floor when I touched a plate cap on an old tube transmitter that had 600 volts on it.
Yeah, you can go flying.
Yeah.
It's because all your muscles contract at once, so the force actually just pushes you.
Yeah.
I'd rather get shot than that. I'd rather get that taser and spray.
Oh,
I'd rather get the taser and spray me once.
Oh, yeah. I had a pepper spray go off in my pocket. Okay. In the United States, it didn't fully discharge. It just went off with one shot. And I don't want to have any more of that stuff. In the United States, which is connected to the green wire in a 3-wire electrical plug. Your electrical plug usually has a white, a black, and a green. The green is the equipment ground, sometimes also called the safety ground. It's the one to keep that thing from floating if something goes wrong. It's the one that is connected to that third pin that every once in a while you find somebody cuts it off because they don't want to play with it. We had a janitor at Caterpillar that kept cutting the safety ground off on the floor scrubber. I don't even want to think about it. What is the purpose of a fuse in an electrical circuit? To interrupt the power in case of an overload. You want the fuse to burn out, not the wire in the wall. Why is it unwise to install a 20-amp fuse in place of a 5-amp fuse? Excessive current could cause a fire. Used to be with the old screw-in fuses, they put a penny behind it and screw it in. That penny didn't burn out. Yeah, but the house did. What is a good way to guard against electrical shock at your station? Use 3-wire cords and plugs for AC power equipment. Connect all AC powered station equipment to a common safety ground. I actually have on several of my benches wires that connect all the stuff. One wire. They're jury rigged with screws, but they're okay. And use a circuit protected by a ground fault interrupter. GFI. You'll see them in your bathroom, and you hit the button and it tests it. 2 things. If you have those, test them every once in a while. And secondly, if you don't have them, see if you can get them installed. Bathrooms, kitchens, garages, pool decks, Any outdoor location, yeah. Just, please, I don't want to find out that one of you got, or one of your kids got fried, okay? That's just not a good thing. And by the way, a amateur electrician with any knowledge can install one. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. But if you're gonna do it and you don't know how, get somebody to show you. First thing is turn off the breaker downstairs. Okay. What is a good way to guard against electricals? Oh, we did that. Which of these precautions should be taken when installing devices for lightning protection in a coaxial feed line? I actually have a plate with all of my feed-throughs and my lightning protectors on it, on the wall. It's in a plastic box. And there's a good heavy number 6 or 4 ground wire straight down to a 8-foot ground stake in the ground. If you're going to put up outside antennas, do a good ground. The 8-foot ground stake costs $6 at Lowe's. The clamp for it costs $1.75, I believe. And a piece of number 4 wire to go down, maybe $1. And you can, if you can use a pair of pliers, a screwdriver, and a hammer, you can put it in. One of the neat things that I'll tell you is if you drive the ground stakes close to the house, and the house isn't over 30 years old, that ground is still soft. And by the way, I have a stake driver that will get it down to about this level, and then you'll have to use a hammer. But, yeah, it's a poster. Yeah. But you mount all the protectors on a metal plate that is in turn connected to an external ground rod. Do not connect it to the water pipe in the house. A lot of people do that. And what they don't realize is that in many cases the meter is an insulator between the 2 pipes, and they're not actually grounding.
I live on a second floor, how do I ground anything?
What?
I live on a second floor.
Okay.
I
What
can't
do
put
you,
anything to ground.
yeah. Okay. You come down the wall with a nice quiet ground if you need to. Okay. If you're going to ground equipment, but not outside antennas, the 3rd pin in the thing is a good ground. I've actually taken an extension cord, or a plug, a 3-pin plug, connected a wire to the big pin, and used that as a ground. Okay? I ground my generator that way.
Now, when you're saying bring with this, with the lightning protection, you're saying to put one of the wires through the plate,
Yep.
and then that plate has to go
Well,
over with it.
I actually have what's called a pass-through on there that I screw a coax on each side.
Okay.
Yeah. Piece of plate, drill some holes, put the pass-throughs in. Now, I have 11 outdoor antennas. Okay? So I've got a little bit of an overkill. If you had one, I would come down, bring the coax in with a lightning protector out there and a from the ground.
Does that go actually outside have like on, well, I just know my DirecTV antenna had a copper wire on the outside, is that what they do on with these too? Copper wire?
No,
No.
no.
No, I know what you're saying. That piece of coax actually had a little piece of wire right alongside it.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, it's not
No,
like that.
okay.
That's used for something else.
It's actually used as a support
Oh,
between the pole and a home if it's strung.
oh, is that what it's
But
used?
it also can be used as a ground path, and that's what they use it for.
Okay. What safety equipment should always be included in home-built equipment that is powered from 120 volt AC power circuits? A fuse or circuit breaker in series with the AC hot connector. You know, should have a fuse. If you build something, you should have a fuse in it. And it has to be in the black wire, not the white one. What should be done to all external ground rods or earth connections? Bond them together with heavy wire or conductive strap. I have a tower that's a 3-leg. You know, you've seen the one has the things you can climb, which I don't. Mine lays down for work. But I have 3 ground stakes around me. I've got a strap from each leg down to a ground stake. I have another strap that goes around, and another strap that goes around here. That is the right way. Actually, the strap around up here is not necessary, but it's there. What it does is if you accidentally lose one of those straps, you're still heavily grounded. Okay? I'm sticking 40 feet up in the air. But you bond them together with heavy copper or heavy wire conductive strap. What can happen if a lead acid storage battery is charged or discharged too quickly? The battery could overheat, give off flammable gas, or explode. The word flammable gas in there, replace that with the word hydrogen. That makes a lot more sense. What kind of hazard might exist in a power supply when it is turned off or disconnected? You might receive an electrical shock from a charge stored in large capacitors. Every power supply has large capacitors. When should members of a tower work team wear a hard hat and safety glasses? At all times when work is being done on the tower. Do you know what value a hard hat has if you are under a tower that's 175 feet up and people are working on the top? What?
You can get a wrench in it.
If you get a wrench on the head, it'll just be served to identify who you are. If a bolt gets dropped, you're okay. But anything very heavy is going right through that hard hat. It doesn't matter. Just nothing stops it. If you're working up on the bottom of a tower, there is nothing that approaches the value of situation awareness. Okay. What is a good precaution to observe before climbing an antenna tower? Put on carefully inspected climbing harness and safety glasses. Okay? We had a picture in the QST, the Ham Radio magazine, a couple months ago of this very pretty girl, climbing harness, everything,
Was
on
she
a
in a
tower.
bikini too?
On a tower, no, on a tower. And her safety line, the rope, had 2 tie wraps around it to hold it together. There were about 4 safety violations in that picture, and nobody spotted them until the magazine came out. The ARRL got scorched for that one. Their only defense was they had some ad agency take the picture, and the ad agency apparently did not know what they were doing. They may have done a good picture, but they didn't understand safety. Under what circumstances is it safe to climb a tower without a helper or observer? Never. Which of the following is an important safety precaution to observe when putting up an antenna tower? Look for and stay clear of any overhead electrical wires. If you don't know whether they are electrical or not, you assume they are. Not only that, it pisses off the power company if you create a problem for them. What is the purpose of a gin pole? A gin pole is an arm that you attach to a tower that has a pulley on it. And when you're building very high towers, you put one of those on the top, and you pull up the next section and you put it on. And then you move the gin pole up and you do the same thing again. And you keep doing that. It's used to lift tower sections or antennas. If you want to see how things can go terribly wrong, there was a 1,200-foot high tower that was just completed. I think it was Bolivia. There's a video of this on YouTube. They're getting ready to lift an antenna, put on the top. I forget whether the antenna was 10 tons or 10,000 pounds. But it's a big antenna. It's a lot of weight. You've got 3 guys on the top of the tower that are going up who are waiting to mount the antenna. You have 2 guys riding the antenna up. And you've got about 4 on the ground. And we're working. About 2/3 of the way up, the gin pole separated from the tower. At this point, the antenna starts down.
I'm betting the guys at the bottom really wanted their hard hats on.
Okay, the 2 guys that are riding the antenna, they're gone. It's that simple. Partway down, the antenna hits one of the guy wires. These things are so stressed that when it hit this one and tore it, the 2 other ones pulled the tower this way. And as it starts to go, the tower accordions. 3 guys on the top, they're done. Pieces of the tower got 2 of the ones on the ground. Death toll, I think, was 7. Anytime you work on a tower or work up, if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. Okay? The guys, by the way, what caused the failure? Somebody used a U-bolt. The U-bolts to hook the gin pole to the tower weren't strong enough. It was okay when they were lifting the tower sections that were about 1,000 pounds. But when they started lifting that antenna, it separated. Somebody didn't engineer the gin pole. What is the minimum safe distance from a power line to allow when installing an antenna? Enough so that if the antenna falls unexpectedly, no part of it can come closer than 10 feet to the power lines. I will tell you this, I won't work on any that gets that close. I want more separation than that. Which of the following is an important safety rule to remember when using a crank-up tower? Now there's 2 kinds of crank-up towers. There's ones that do this, and there's ones that do this. Come out of the center, or this. These, you're not going to be able to climb unless it's in the full up position. But this type of tower cannot be climbed unless it's retracted the whole way or the mechanical safety locks are on. The reason is it will not support you. It's not designed to support that extra weight. And what it will do, it'll collapse down in itself. And you'll lose fingers, hands, and feet. Okay? And of course, your safety harness will probably also be severed. What is considered to be a proper grounding method for a tower? Separate, what I told, 8-foot ground rods for each tower leg, bonded to the tower and to each other. You want that lightning to have a path to go to ground. Why should you avoid attaching an antenna to a utility pole? It pisses off Verizon. Okay, the antenna could contact high voltage power lines. It does piss off Verizon too. Which of the following is true when installing grounding connectors for lightning protections? Sharp bends are to be avoided. If you come down and make a bend, the lightning will hop off. And it will hit something else. Mine are all driven as close down as I can and going straight down. I have one ground rod that's only in about 4 feet. I can't get it in. I've got rock under it. Okay? I just don't know what else to do with it. I have hammered that thing. I've even had my son-in-law hammer it. I think you did too.
Yeah.
And we can't get that. We hit that thing with a 10-pound sledge 8-10 times and measure it, and it hasn't moved an eighth of an inch. I have a feeling that if we keep hammering it, at some point it will fracture the rock that's underneath, and then it'll all of a sudden.
I remember though, we were like standing there, we all kept hammering on it. I think like the sledgehammer, it was just like
Boom, down. Nothing.
nothing.
Which of the following establishes grounding requirements for an amateur radio antenna tower? It's the local electrical codes. Whatever they say is what. Unfortunately, many of the areas did not have real electrical codes for that. What I do is I look at what best practice electrical codes are, and that's what I'm using. I will tell you this, there is no grounding system that will guarantee you will not get a lightning strike. Even the best radio towers for public safety and stuff will once in a while take a hit that the lightning protection will not cover.
At least we were calling it last year.
Did it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there's also another whammy. In York County, we have a lot of trouble with guys coming in, cutting off the copper grounding wires, taking them down to Dundalk and selling for scrap. Okay? By the way, do you know how they fixed that in York County? They found out that galvanized iron is just as good for grounding, and it ain't worth anything as scrap. Okay? That stopped. But, you know, there's a little bit of not quite as good. But a little bit of not quite as good is better than nothing there when they cut one just before a thunderstorm. Which of the following is a good practice when installing ground wires or on a tower for lightning protection? Ensure the connections are short and direct. What is the purpose of a safety wire through a turnbuckle used to tension guy wires? Actually, a turnbuckle is 2 bolts that are reverse threaded, and as you turn it, it pulls them in. Okay? If you don't put a safety line through them, keep them, they can, with vibration, back out. All that does is keep them from loosening. What type of radiation are VHF and UHF radio signals? Non-ionizing. This basically says it will not cause genetic damage, it will not cause cancer. I think it's probably close, but I don't trust it. Which of the following frequencies has the lowest value for maximum permissible exposure limit? 50 megahertz. At 6 meters, your body absorbs more of the energy than it does at any other frequency. So if your transmitter is okay on 50 megahertz, it's okay. What is the maximum power level that an amateur radio station may use at VHF frequencies before an RF exposure calculation or evaluation is required? 50 watts PEP at the antenna. Now, let me give you a definition of this. If you have a 50-watt transmitter, your maximum is PEP is 50 watts, unless you have a gain antenna, then you can, because it's, I'm sorry, no, PEP, forget the gain antenna. 50 watts at the antenna is that. If you have a 60-watt transmitter, you technically need one of these. But if you're using a coax feed line that loses enough of the energy, and it's only 50, you're okay. If you have any questions, if you're using a transmitter that's 50 watts or less, You don't have to worry about this. If you have a bigger transmitter, then you gotta do one. I have a couple of hundreds. I have to do them. And there's a spreadsheet that all you do is fill in numbers, and it tells you yay or nay.
What's PEP?
Peak envelope power. It's the peak, the highest power that you produce out of the transmitter. What factors affect the RF exposure of people near an antenna station or an amateur station antenna? The frequency, 50 megahertz is the worst. As you go up or down, it gets better. The power level, the more power, the worse it is. The distance from the antenna to the person. You double the distance, you quarter the power. And the radiation pattern of the antenna. If I have a beam and I have it shooting at you, you're going to get a lot more than he is. Okay? All of those are correct. I have mine worked out. I know what it is. They're okay. Why do we, oh, by the way, one of the other things that I see happening at MCOM events, a lot of these guys have a tripod, something like that, with an antenna sitting on. And they set the tripod right behind them. I like to get a little further away than that, okay? It's a 50-watt transmitter, yes, it's legal, yes. But you know what? I don't absorb any more nuclear radiation than I have to, and I don't absorb any more RF than I have to. Why do exposure limits vary with frequency? Because the human body absorbs more RF at some frequencies than others. Again, 50 megahertz is the worst. Which of the following is an acceptable method to determine that your station is in complies with the FCC RF exposure regulations? All three of those are correct. There's a bulletin that you can use, there's computer modeling you can use, and there's also, you can go out and buy calibrated laboratory grade equipment and do that, which is thousands of dollars. I use the FCC Bulletin 65. What could happen if a person accidentally touched your antenna while you were transmitting? They could get a painful RF burn. The voltage at the bottom of your antenna for a 50-watt transmitter is somewhere around 15 volts, 10 volts. Wouldn't shock you, wouldn't hurt you. But you get to the top of that antenna, that voltage may be 800, 900 volts. Okay? We used to tape neon light bulbs to the top of the antennas and they glow purple. Why? Because we did it. Which of the following actions might amateur operators take to prevent RF or exposure to RF radiation in excess of FCC supplied limits? Relocate the antenna. I ain't gonna set my tripod with my antenna right behind my chair. If I've got 30 feet of coax, it's gonna move 15 feet back. Does that make a lot of difference? More than what you think. 2 feet versus 15 feet is about an 8-to-1 ratio by the time you start working on it. How can you make sure your station stays in compliance with RF safety regulations? By reevaluating the station whenever an item of equipment is changed. I got a transmitter that went from 100 watts to about 120, my biggest one. I looked at it, I was so far off of being in trouble, that's it. But technically, when you buy another transmitter that's bigger, you need to take one quick look. Might only be a quick look, it might be more. What is the duty cycle? Why is duty cycle one of the factors used to determine safe RF radiation exposure levels? It affects the exposure of the people to the radiation. Are any of you work with nuclear radiation? I'm a RAD officer in Dover Township. And we have to have those for TMI. The further you can get away from a radiation source, the better. The shorter the period of time you can be there, the better. The more you can put shielding between you and it, the better. Now, shielding, 4 feet of concrete's really nice. Probably not realistic, but even a concrete block wall helps. Okay? But how long you're there, the percentage of time you're there, and it's the same thing with the transmitter. A broadcast transmitter that's on all the time is really bad. A public service transmitter that's on maybe 20% of the time is only on when it's, that is only 1/5 as bad for the same power level. Okay? That's that's what the duty cycle is, how much percent of time is it on. A 50% duty cycle is, it's on half the time. What is the definition of duty cycle during the averaging time for RF exposure? It's the percentage of time that the transmitter is transmitting. What do you think the duty cycle of my transmitter is at home? In 100 hours of elapsed time, 4 days. Even if it's heavy, I don't know. What?
4 hours.
Probably not even that, but yeah, that would probably be the highest. Well, if you're on for 4 hours in 100 hours, that's only 4%. Okay. How does RF radiation differ from ionizing radiation? This is a question I don't agree with the answer on. RF radiation does not have sufficient energy to cause genetic damage. As far as I'm concerned, the jury's still out on that one. I know this, it doesn't have the energy to cause extensive damage in short periods of time. What I don't know is what does it do long periods. And that's where the cell phone and the raw comes in. That's a very small transmitter, very low power, but it's sitting right against you. I actually have some concern about a cell phone sitting here. If the averaging time for exposure is 6 minutes, how much power density is permitted if the signal is present for 3 minutes and absent for 3 minutes, rather than being present for the whole 6 minutes? In other words, instead of the transmitter being on for 6 minutes, it's on 3, off 3. That means you're only getting half as much exposure, so you can have twice as much exposure during the time. Okay? Listen, when I play with RAD, and I don't see a whole lot of difference, my rule is, instead of bigger is better, smaller is better. Less time, less exposure, further away, all of it's good. Oh gee, what was that? That's it. That's it. Oh, you're cheating. You're watching the.
Hey, I'm following along.
Okay. Okay. Any questions? I'm willing to answer them at this point. I will say one thing here before I forget about it. Somehow, I got an email overnight that the test team is going to be here at 12, not at 12:30. So I don't know where we lost it in the conversation, or if that was a mistake. So somewhere between now and 12, we'll find out if they're going to show up. Okay?
So what's the problem with that?
Well, I was figuring you guys would have a chance to eat lunch before, but, okay.
Oh, that's fresh in our minds.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what the guys in the hospital did to me one day. I'm in a bed waiting to go to surgery, haven't had anything to eat, It's now noon, and two of them are sitting there in the same room eating their lunch. And the one guy says to the other one, "Are you gonna eat lunch in front of these patients that haven't had anything to eat?" And he said, "Yeah, doesn't matter." Okay, so, all right. Well, thank you guys for showing up. Makes my days worthwhile. And
Thank you, Ralph, for.
Yeah,
running
definitely.
the class.
Thank you
This
very
is-
much.
Really good.
you know,
I hope I pass, I don't wanna see you get another speeding ticket.
I'll have to tell you that.
You guys run a lot of VASCAR here. I see freaking lines everywhere. So now you fund these beautiful buildings?
And,
I beat a fast car ticket one time. Now, I beat it because I was doing 48 miles an hour in a 45 zone.
It shouldn't have been cited anyway.
Why do you stop
But
it?
Yeah.
I got stopped. This was in the days when the Northern York County Regional,
Oh, no, they still are terrible.
they're pretty good now, but there was a day when they did some weird things.
No, there is a racket going on with that police department like I have never seen in my
Okay.
life.
Whole personality down there.
Okay, now, I just pulled out with a 4-cylinder Chrysler LeBaron. Just maybe 0.2 of a mile from the beginning of their speed zone. And they clocked me at 68 miles an hour. There ain't no way that car would have hit 68 miles an hour by the end of that zone, hitting it, let alone me averaging it in there. And I said to the guy, I said, you know, look, I looked down when you pulled up behind me, I was doing 48. If you want to ticket me for 48, I can't argue with it.
No, there's something rats.
We walked back to his car, and he calls the guy, he's chasing, he's chasing, the other guy's clock. He has him read the numbers to him, and the second and third digit he had reversed. Okay? And now he crosses out the 68 and puts in 58
Within 100 yards of the speed car.
on the ticket. And I said, still don't buy it. They checked the calibration numbers that they had put in. They keyed them in from the sheet. And the guy below had keyed them in.
I just said, you know, your way.
And now, he crosses it out and he puts 47 there. Now wait, it gets funny. The guy who is doing the clocking is the chief. Okay? And I said to him, so I drove down to where the other guy was, because they were telling me, we're going to give you a ticket. I drove down. And I finally said to the chief, I said, I'll tell you what, you want to?
Now, I went underneath the sign. It's not.
We're going to discuss this later.
So he must have been
The other guy
one
was
time
trying
to get it. So I'm like, no, sir, I have no idea anything about it.
Okay?
Yes, I just pulled everything. I
Finally,
put everything above there.
I just turned around and started walking away, and I said, I'll tell you what,
Oh, you're local?
you do what you want to do. When this hits, I'll be at the JP, and we'll discuss what happened. But I said, one of the things I want you to do is tell the JP, was I doing 47, 58, or 68? Okay, if you can't come up with that, intuitively, I couldn't be going that fast.
Yeah.
If I had been, okay, I treated that a different way when I looked down at the speedometer and I was doing 62, when a guy was behind me and walks up and said, do you have any idea? You know.
I had a reverse one, a guy that tried to argue that no way he could have been speeding, drive a truck.
Four lanes were
Because he was,
Yeah.
and, So well, I'm following it, I'm pacing.
Yeah.
You do a red light,